You don't need to see his identification.
We don't need to see his identification.
Move along.
Move along. Move along.
The Star Wars trilogy has thrilled movie audiences for the last 20 years. But since 1983, these adventures could only be seen on the television screen. That means an entire generation has grown up without experiencing the sights and sounds of these films in the way George Lucas had always intended.
Star Wars was designed to be a theatrical experience. It was designed to be on the big screen. Sound is extremely important, and it's very important to the overall enjoyment of the film that it be big.
Stop that ship! Blast them!
For those who have never seen it on the big screen, they have really missed the point of the movie. They really have missed the excitement that happens when you sit with several hundred other people and the electricity that goes through the audience when you see that movie. One of the things I wanted to do was preserve the film so that it could be a viable piece of entertainment in the 21st century.
What's that flashing?
Films, do deteriorate and they disappear. And I think this one had deteriorated a lot more than anybody expected in 20 years. At the same time, I had an ulterior motive that I'd been thinking about for a long time ever since the films were finished, which is there were various things, especially in the original film, that I wasn't satisfied with. Special effects shots that never really were finished, scenes that I'd wanted to include that couldn't have been included for some reason, mostly money and time. I looked at the 20th anniversary as a way as, well, if we're going to reissue them, maybe Fox will go along with allowing me to refurbish them also. So they agreed to that, and that's really what started this whole thing.
In 1995, the restoration began with a concerted effort by 20th Century Fox, Lucasfilm, Skywalker Sound, and Industrial Light and Magic. The task was more daunting than anyone expected.
The most obvious thing that's happened is we've gone back to the original negative, cleaned it up considerably, redone a lot of the optical effects, the wipes, the dissolves, and improved the quality of the film, because it was deteriorating.
Holding her is dangerous. Word of this gets out, it could generate sympathy for the rebellion in the Senate.
I have traced the rebel spies to her. Now she is my only link to finding their secret base.
The actual original negative, it was so far gone that unless we actually did this at this time, we were never going to have the film to be able to release ever again.
Darth Vader isn't black anymore. He starts out coming up to a navy blue and then getting brighter and brighter as the film continues to deteriorate.
There'll be no one to stop us this time.
Yes, sir.
Part of our task was to take this negative and to try and just get the film so they look the way people remember them looking when they first saw them 15, 20 years ago.
So we brought in a team of film restorationists to start a full-scale film restoration. The first step was to take the original negative apart and physically rewash the entire negative. From that point, we realized that the opticals, which we couldn't rewash because the dirt was built into the elements, also had to be recomposited.
Compositing allows separately photographed items to be placed in the same scene. For example, the seeker ball, the lightsaber, and the chess pieces are combined with live action to make up one final shot in the film. Creating composites for the original release of the trilogy required film technicians to physically handle the negative. This led to wear and tear as well as dirt deposits on the final picture. Today, compositing takes place with computers, but before this technology could be applied to Star Wars, all the original elements had to be located. Some scenes had as many as 40 elements for a single shot, as was the case for the asteroid sequence in Empire. Typically, these elements are discarded after the film is completed.
In the case of Star Wars and Empire and Jedi, all those pieces exist. That was due to the fact that George kept everything. So that gives you the ability to do this.
You're not actually going into an asteroid field.
They'd be crazy to follow us, wouldn't they?
Although Star Wars required the most attention, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi had their fair share of technical limitations.
One of the biggest sequences we worked on Empire Strikes Back was the snow battle, the walkers and the speeders in the snow. All of that was done at a time that we used optical technology, of course, to do all that compositing. And a telltale sign that something's been optically composited is a black line around it. And when you have a sequence that takes place in outer space against stars, it's easy to reach a point where those black lines don't show up. But when you have a sequence that takes place against snow in the daylight, every hint of that black matte line becomes very visible. And so the first time through doing the snow battle here 17 years ago, a lot of effort went into finding ways to minimize that black line. One of the ways was to not print all of the elements at their full opacity.
All right, I'm coming in.
Consequently, when you see the snow battle on film, you may notice that there's part of the scenery is visible through the cockpit. And it was a constant trade-off of how transparent can we make the cockpit? At what point is the black line more objectionable than the transparency? And so there was an opportunity to go back into those shots, use the computer technology, and to eliminate all the transparency, but also not have any matte lines.
Another unique aspect of the trilogy is the sound design created in this unknown world.
We would be honored if you would join us.
20 years ago, Ben Burtt set out to capture an organic array of sounds that would soon come to characterize lightsabers and droids. Now he's back, digitally enhancing the sounds that have come to define the world of Star Wars.
This is all your fault.
We didn't want to throw out the sound in the film and do it over. There were so many classic things in it. So many things that we couldn't do better. And they also represent what the film is and how it's known to people. So that we did our best to bring them to the audience as clearly and as high fidelity as possible now.
The whole company is based on the philosophy that sound is 50% of the experience. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is the work that both Gary and Ben have done in the remastering of the soundtrack, because the original mix was so complex, so good, but there was no technology to actually hear it. And one of the things that George has spent an enormous amount of money trying to develop is a THX system in which allows theaters to present films in the way in which filmmakers actually make them.
THX is, for lack of a better term, it's a philosophy. THX was something that George started back around Return of the Jedi, when he developed a specification that theaters needed to meet. They had to use certain types of speakers and components that would deliver a certain performance to be called a THX theater. And for us, it's a plus, because you work hours on end and doing these little nuances, and if it goes out into a theater that can't reproduce it, that the audience won't hear those tiny little things we've done.
Another advance in theater technology is the advent of digital sound. All 3 films in this special edition have been remastered digitally.
The advantage of the sound being presented digitally is that you have 5 channels of sound. So we've redesigned the sound field in the film to bring more of the sound off to go around the audience. So a spaceship can fly from behind you and move all the way to another corner. You also can reproduce low frequencies much more effectively, so you can get a subwoofer, a rumble that's much more effective. Vader uses the Force and there's a rumble, and we've made you hear that rumble now.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Here they come.
I think we have the music sounding much clearer now with the split surrounds. You can hear the whole orchestra and a lot of the nuances in the music that might have gotten garbled or a little buried in the original versions.
When we come back, a look at the trilogy's special effects and a few new surprises as well.